So you're telling me that Think and Grow Rich, this book that we've all heard about, read, has nothing to do with being rich, about making money? Is that what
That's
you're
what I'm
saying?
saying. I think Napoleon Hill was a brilliant marketer. And when people pick up the book Think and Grow Rich, they think they're picking it up for the word rich. But what they discover when they read the book is it's not about rich, it's about the word grow. Think and Grow Rich is really about growth.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because my story with Think and Grow Rich, I first picked it up about a decade ago, maybe a little longer ago than that. And I got about, I don't know how deep into I got, maybe a third of the way through it. And I didn't like it at all. I thought it was more this name it and claim it kind of, and it was because it was going through the filter of the lenses that I had, how I grew up, my money story, et cetera. And I didn't pick it up again until a couple of years ago. And that's when I really fell in love with it. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people perceive this as a get rich quick book, or how to get rich, because it says Think Grow Rich, but it's more about the marketing angle of the title than it is the actual content. So when did you first come in contact with Think and Grow Rich?
I came in contact with that book and books like it years ago when I was in a tremendous amount of personal credit card debt. I had amassed nearly $60,000 worth of personal credit card debt. I think it was 23 active credit cards. And I didn't have a very big salary at the time. And so I was constantly scrambling, trying to just not even barely hit minimum. And so I started reaching out. It's funny how, what it takes to get you to finally reach out for help and look for help. So I reached out and I saw Think and Grow Rich, and I thought, well, that's what I need, is I need to become rich. And so I picked up the book and I read it, and I had a similar reaction in the sense that I thought, oh, this is not going to help me, because it's not going to help me be rich. It's other stuff. And it wasn't until I returned to it and really read through it that something unlocked for me when I read the material, and it changed everything for me. And that is that for me, Think and Grow Rich, again, was not about becoming rich. When I really read the stories, because he's a great storyteller, the stories in that book were not about people who were out to make money. They were not out to scale. They were not out to do any of those things. They were interested in pursuing their passion or interests. And when I really got that this book was not about growing rich, it was about growing as a person and pursuing those interests that I had, that's when the entire book unlocked for me. And then I went back through and read it, for the third or fourth time at that point. And I saw really a total blueprint, which ended up becoming a blueprint for me. And then I've, taught it for many, many years and become a blueprint for other people as well.
How long ago was it when you came across it with the credit card debt and you had to read it? Like how long ago was that?
That's been a while now. Gosh, I can't remember exactly, but probably I was in my 30s and I'm in my 50s now. So, a couple decades or so ago. And once truthfully, once I got it, and I really got it all the way in, I really understood that this was about a sea change within myself of how I was going to move forward in life. That credit card debt, which a financial expert told me was going to take 20 something years to pay off if I never used a credit card again, and I paid my minimum payment plus a little extra, he said, good news, it'll be 20 something years before and then you'll be out of debt. And I thought, oh my gosh, that just sounded like a death sentence to me. So, but when I got Think and Grow Rich, and I really started using it in the way that felt the most correct for me, I got out of debt within 3.5 years. I almost tripled my salary in that 3.5 years. And I really just unlocked so much within me. So that book really was one of the books that really changed everything.
We're talking with Joel Fotinos today on The Root of All Success. I'm really honored to have Joel. I'm really honored that you're here. It took me a long time to persistently talk you into coming on this show because you don't normally do things like this. So I'm very grateful that you're here. But to tell everybody a little bit about who you are a body, mind, spirit genre publisher. You've been in this game for quite some time. You're also an interfaith minister living in North New Jersey. And the reason I reached out to you is because of and we've been talking about Think and Grow Rich, is that you are a co-author of the Think and Grow Rich workbook, which those that are watching this on YouTube can see a copy of this. This is adapted from Napoleon Hill's landmark classic Think and Grow Rich by Joel Fotinos and August Gold, which we can talk a little bit about that August in just a second because I don't know him. I think I similarly tried to reach out to him and didn't get a response at all. But so you've had a lot of interest in these motivational books, My Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich being the big one. You've been working in the revitalize the new thought authors like Ernest Holmes, and you've started things like the Sacred Center New York and serves as a staff minister there in Jersey. And you've been influenced by mystics like Thomas Merton and Rumi, and you've collaborated with some great people. And you've written how many books? It's a lot.
I don't know, a lot.
How many books have you written?
Something like 14 with my name on it. 14. I've also ghostwritten a lot of books for other people.
Yeah, so that's how I found you, because I picked up after I fell back in love with Think and Grow Rich. I picked up the workbook. I don't even remember how I found it. I think it was maybe the Napoleon Hill Institute. I don't remember where I found it, but I found it, got it. A friend of mine and I went through it together, and then it started to really make sense from a workbook perspective. And so that's how, and I just, one of the action items that you tell people to do in here is like, who do you need to know and who do you need to reach out to accomplish your definite purpose? And you were on that list for me. And now here we are having the conversation.
Here we go. Well, it took you, I think, like 2 years or something because I don't do these types of interviews anymore, but I could tell, that you really want to embody the teachings, and I'm so impressed with how you are doing that, and so I'm so happy to be here to talk about it with you. The workbook itself grew out of my early teaching of the material, and kind of one of the things that I am interested in as somebody who publishes in the self-help genres and has published probably more of these kind of motivational classics than anyone else in history is the fact that I want people to not just read the book, I want them to experience the book. And for me, putting together the Think and Grow Rich workbook was a way to help people just actually put these principles to effect in their lives. The thing that would drive me crazy is when I would talk about Think and Grow Rich and people would say this, "Oh yeah, I read that book years ago." And I'd say, "Well, are you rich?" No, hasn't happened for me yet. And that would drive me crazy because I think, well, if this book is credited with helping more people become millionaires and billionaires than any other book in history, and you read it years ago and it had no effect on you, then is it the book's fault, or did you not really integrate the material from the book? And so the workbook for me was a way to help people to really use the material interactively and apply it directly to their lives.
Well, when you did this, you sat down to do this workbook, did you have to get permission from anybody to say, look, I'm going to use the title and I'm going to use the content, I'm going to republish portions of it? From a business standpoint, and I think I told you this is some of my interest from a business standpoint, how did you get access to that content to republish it and not rebrand it, but repackage it?
Well, there are editions of Think and Grow Rich that are in the public domain. So the answer to that question is no, I did not need to, because I used a public domain edition in the same way that, many books go into the public domain after a certain period of time or meet certain criteria. So in that case, I did not. I did end up publishing a number of books in conjunction with the Napoleon Hill Foundation, and those books are copyrighted. I puts them together. Like, for instance, I published this book, Success Habits, this book, and a number of others. And those books are copyrighted by the Napoleon Hill Foundation. So that's a different situation.
So who is August Gold, your co-author on this workbook? You talk about in the introduction how the two of you sat down and said, hey, we got to figure out how to do this and work through this together. Like, who is he and how did he play a part?
Well, August Gold is actually a she, and she was a creative partner of mine at the time, and we ended up becoming mastermind partners. As you know from reading the book, having a mastermind is a really important aspect of the Think and Grow Rich philosophy. And Napoleon Hill talks about a mastermind group. What ended up working best for me and for August was to be mastermind partners. Because we could really work together one-on-one. So for years, we met every single week for several hours a week at a restaurant. We had our own booth. The waiters all knew that we'd be there. They'd have our drink orders already ready for us, etc. And because we did it for years, and really just worked through every single concept and principle of that book and other books, in that vein, like The Richest Man in Babylon and Master Key System and Science of Getting Rich, and I've got all of them. And we really worked through every single principle and concept that we could come up with. And it's so valuable to do that with another person or other people because we can kind of tell our own stories, but when you mirror it with someone else, they can say, have you thought about this? Or I think, that doesn't make sense because you also said this, or is that in line with your goals? Or, and really help you through the material. So we did that for years. And the workbook, again, grew out of that as well.
Was this in terms of the 11 or 14 books, or no, you said 14, in terms of the 14 books that you've authored with your name on it, where was this in the journey? Was it early? Was it late? Was it in the middle?
Gosh, boy, that's a great question. I would say it's probably one of the, I would say it was early. I haven't thought of it in that way. It was probably early. Let's see, when was this published? In 06? Is that right? No, 09. Yeah, probably on the early side of things for me.
So when you had written, I guess as a prolific author yourself, you've written 14 books, this being one of them, and this being more of a workbook, which is a little different than just writing a book, obviously. Did you have that experience? Was what I was getting at. Did you have the experience of writing a book before you started out? Hey, I'm just going to, you and August and I are going to go through this and write a workbook. We've never done this before, but you'd written some books before you.
Yes, absolutely. I had written a number of things on my own. August and I had a number of projects together around that time as well, and yeah.
So. Interesting thing about the Think and Grow Rich ideology, and I want to go back to something you said a moment ago and get maybe dig in a little bit deeper on this. There's think and grow rich. So take out the and. There's three important words here. Think, grow, rich. And you said at the outset that grow is really what this thing is about. And I don't necessarily disagree with you. But I think that think is probably is the precursor to all of this, because growth can't happen without first thinking. And then rich, I think, is the outcropping of that. And Napoleon Hill goes back and forth in his writings saying this isn't about material riches. And then he goes and says, no, it is about material riches. Like he goes a little bit back and forth. And I think as long as he was alive and wrote things, he's due that grace of saying, well, yeah, you said it wasn't, and then you said it was. Okay, I get it. But it's the think part. So I too have run into people just like you did where they said, oh yeah, I read that book. As a matter of fact, my son and I, when we were going through Think and Grow, the workbook together, we went to a little local restaurant. It was a hamburger joint. And it was a little hole in the wall hamburger joint owned by a mom and pop type thing. And we had those books in our hand. We had these books in our hand. And so when we walked up to the counter, she thought we were there to sell something, because two guys walking up to the counter, and she just kind of looked at us and we're like, yes. And she goes, are you selling something? I was like, no, we're here to eat. And she goes, well, what is that? And I showed it to her. She goes, oh yeah, I read that book years ago. Same thing. And when we went to sit down, my son and I kind of mentioned, like, Jace, his name's Jace. I said, Jace, this is why we're doing this workbook. You can't just read this book and set it on the shelf. You have to do it, because if that woman had read the book and applied it, now, and maybe I'm judging too much here, but like, she wouldn't be running a hole in the wall thing that eventually closed. Like, there's something different about the way we think if we apply these things. So what are your thoughts? What's your response to that idea about the think word and think?
Well, I'm with you on that. Think is the how, and grow is the what, and riches are the result. And so when we try to do the equation backwards, try to get riches by thinking, and most people leave the grow part out because they think the answer to getting more money is more money. And so they don't want the growth part. They don't want anything to change. They just want everything as it is now, but get more money. Then they've kind of got the equation backwards. So when you turn it around and you use your thoughts to grow, then the result is that you will experience more riches. And as Napoleon Hill says, and you correctly, I think, sum it up, he says it will be financial riches, but it will be other kinds of riches as well. And so it is an equation. And I think that, when people use thinking, not just in terms of what can I do, but when they open themselves up and shift their perception, that's where the gold is. So small businesses that, for instance, are struggling, and they pick up a book like Think and Grow Rich, thinking that it's going to have a magical, like The Secret, it'll be magical, and all they have to do is kind of say some affirmations and everything will change. They're missing the action part, and the kind of shift in perception part, which is really where the answer ends up being. It's easy to see this too in life when you watch shows like those shows where they go into restaurants that are failing, and a famous chef like a Gordon Ramsay will come in, or Robert Irvine, and they'll work with these restaurants that are struggling, and they just come in and say, wow, have you thought that maybe you should clean the refrigerators and actually have clean tables and do this and that? And it blows these people's minds. And that's because we can really easily get stuck in how things are. And that's where a mastermind partner or group comes in, because they can act like that Gordon Ramsay or Robert Irvine, and they can say, well, have you thought of this? It seems very apparent to me that this simple change would yield great results in your experience, whether it's personal or business. And so there is an equation. And what's really fantastic about Think and Grow Rich is, and I think you actually mentioned this a lot in your writings, your emails, and also in your videos, is there's so much common sense in the Think and Grow Rich philosophy. And none of it has to do with, dividends, bonds, stocks, or anything like that. His great ideas about growing yourself and growing your business are imagination, decision making, and energy. And so it's fantastic when you actually get into it and begin to use the material in a really applicable way.
Let's take a quick break to thank our amazing sponsors for making this podcast possible.
I finally got it. It's the brand new Relay credit card. So check it out. I'm going to do a little unboxing for you so you can check this out. So here we go. Nice little case. Kind of like the American Express, they're not playing. They're doing it right. Oh, look at this. There's a quote right inside that says, "Success is having to worry about every damn thing in the world except money. Johnny Cash. That's pretty good. I've not heard that one. Oh, this is nice. A little thing on the back, up to 1.5% cash back, no annual fees or interest, 30-day billing cycle. And there it is. It's the Relay credit card. It's a Visa. So I'm not going to show you my number, but there it is. Look at that. Boom. Go check out Relay. Go to therealjasonduncan.com/relay, and you could start with one of the best in the world.
Thanks for listening to our sponsors. Now, back to the show.
Now, you said earlier, and I don't know if it was pre-show before we went live, or you've said it since we've been talking now, but that you teach Think and Grow Rich differently than most people. You think through it a little differently. What do you mean by that?
Well, I teach it as a mindset, as a lifestyle philosophy. So I work with lots of I have worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I work with a lot of people in business, CEOs, COOs. We never actually ever once talk about the business. We talk about this idea of growth and what does growth mean for you and what does success mean for you. So we live in a culture and a society that has very heavy definitions of what success should look like. But when you get, down to it, what success really actually means for people is very different. There are studies of people who are at the end of their life, and when they're asked what made your life successful or what would have made your life successful, never do people talk about their business. They never talk about 3% growth. They never talk about scaling. They always talk about very simple things, which, when you're not at the end of your life or in those kinds of crisis areas, when we talk about them, they sound too simple to be real, or they don't sound applicable to like real life issues. When in fact, I think it's the exact opposite. When we keep those at the forefront of our mind, these simple ideas at the forefront of our mind, then they aren't just concepts that are in a book. They become really the compass points that move us forward in a very specific way.
So the idea of mindset, let's talk about that for just a second, because the friend of mine that I went through the workbook together the first time, he's a mindset coach. That's what he does. He's called the Mindset Doctor. His name is Dr. Justin Mosley, great friend of mine. Shout out to Dr. J. But we meet every week, kind of like you and August did for years. We meet every Wednesday morning for coffee. We talk about, life and business and family and what's going on. But occasionally we'll do a study. And we did this study. And I can say that most of what this is, in my opinion, this whole Think and Grow Rich, which based on the laws of success, and you were talking about success here for just a moment, and I want to go back to that in a few minutes, but this idea of growing and thinking and becoming rich really all boils down to the mindset that we carry. And it's about mental fitness, mental strength, because if we allow negativity, and this is why Napoleon Hill talked about the PMA, positive mental attitude, all the time. If we allow negativity, that's coming from the devil, and he wrote Outwitting the Devil, which we could definitely talk about. I love that book. I actually probably like that book more than Think and Grow Rich. But I think the idea here is that it's all about how we set our mind, because the Creator, God, Yahweh, gave us one thing over which we have complete control, and that's how we think. And it's how we respond mentally to the things that happen to us in life. That's the only thing we have control over. So that, to me, is the secret to all of this, is that if we understand that mindset, that we are in control of those things, all of the other things we want in life can open up to us. Now, you and I share a background. We're both ordained ministers, and you're I don't know how active you are still in doing that. I haven't been active as a minister in a long, long time, but does that have anything to do with the idea of why you see this as mindset being the key to all of this, or is there some other reason?
Well, it does. When I began to use these principles in Think and Grow Rich and books like The Science of Getting Rich, which I'm sure you've read, and other books, I suddenly was like, this is fantastic. And I started making all these goals, and I'd hit all these goals, and then I kept doing it, and I experienced more and more and more. And at a certain point, I just had a moment of, wait, is that what's going to happen now is I just keep making more financial goals and just hit them, or more business goals and hit them. That's it. And thankfully, I, as a minister and a longtime study or student of great writers like Thomas Merton or the great mystics, what I understood was that was my ego. This is, a lot of topic in very short time. That's an ego based version of success. And there's nothing wrong with those parts of success. But that there's something that's more fulfilling, more satisfying, and really, I think, more important ultimately. And that is, you might want to call your soul based or your values based version of success. And so, as a minister, I was able to kind of bring that in. For me, my life is kind of guided by three things. One is curiosity. I think being curious will get you through everything in life, and I love being a lifelong student. The second is creativity and living a creative life, and the third is service. And so when I base my decisions on those three things, then I have found that the results that I get are so much more satisfying than if it's just, oh, I want, a bigger house, or I want, whatever material goal I might have. So I would say that my ministry really is very much infused in the way that I teach Think and Grow Rich.
So curiosity, creativity, and service as guideposts for what you do. And I think those are really good. And I think if somebody's looking for guideposts, those are probably three good, easy ones to pick up and live by. I don't think you can go wrong with those three things. But speaking of success, this idea of Think and Grow Rich actually started out as the Laws of Success, written by Napoleon Hill in his 20 plus years of studying all these successful people. And then he repackaged it into a much simpler, easier to consume. And I think I heard him do a speech where the original title was Use Your Noodle to Get the Boodle. and then he changed it to Think and Grow Rich, which was, a great marketing ploy. But in terms of the word success, because we've touched on this, what do you think that means? What does that mean to Joel?
For me, the word success means living a life of contentment. If you were to ask me back when I had all of that debt, the idea of success would have meant being debt free and having $1 million in the bank. When that happened, and I still was trying to chase something, that was a great clue of, this is not the answer. This seemed like the answer. This is what I'm told is the answer, but that's not the answer. So that's why I always like to return to the people who lived a different way and walked a different path. So for me, success is being connected to each day, to be fully awake and aware as much as I can, to be of service, to be kind, and to do things each day that bring me joy, and also, I think, contribute to the world. I'd love to have a bumper sticker version of what success is, but that's really kind of where it's at for me. And it didn't used to be, but that's what, as I grew with my thinking, that's where I went to. What would you say yours is?
So thank you for turning that back on me. Success for me is, by dictionary definition, is just achieving the desired outcome. Like if you want something, you achieve it, then that's success, the dictionary definition. So in your case, $1 million in the bank, debt free, you reach it, that's success. But I think in terms of success for me is just exercising the gifts that Father God has given me in service of others and enjoying this life. I think if I can do that, then that to me is success.
Yeah, so we're similar in that way.
Yeah. So by that definition that you gave for yourself of success, do you consider yourself to be successful?
I do. I really do. And but at the same time, I really strive to be more so every single day. I'm constantly humbled by the grace and capacity of other people to forgive or to help or to give of themselves, give their time, their talents. And I am constantly inspired by other people in how much they give to the world and to other people. And so that's something for me that I do feel like I've reached a great level of that personal type of success. And yet um, I always, I would never want to think that I've reached a pinnacle of that, because there's so much more that I can learn and so much more I can do and so much more I can give.
So going back to the workbook for just a second, you take great pains in the workbook, especially in that first chapter. The first step towards riches is desire, which you put in task 1 is what is the exact amount of money. And I'm going to assume that that's the reason you chose that is because it's a measurable outcome. But then you get into this definite plan, which is task number 4, is definite plan, which ties into the definite purpose in life, which is one of the main points, one of the 17 main points that Napoleon Hill teaches, is having a definiteness of purpose. And outwitting the devil. The devil talks about drifters are the people, the 98% of the world who don't have this definite purpose, and that leads us to all kinds of bad things. So first, I would be curious to know, what is your definite purpose in life? And then I want to back that up a little bit and talk about that, because this is one part of this whole teaching that I'm still not crystal clear on. I think I have clarity, but it's not crystal, and I'd be interested to hear what you think. So first, Joel, what's your definite purpose in life? What's your thing?
Do you mean like my total life goal, or?
Yeah, as we filter it through the lens of Napoleon Hill's teaching about having definite purpose, what is your definite purpose and plan in life? What's that for you?
Well, I think it's just what we just talked about. My definite purpose in life is to learn, to take actions that are positive for myself, for my family, and for the world, and to really try to be of service to others in ways that I really feel like I can do well. I think, when we talk about kind of the ultimate definite purpose, it's hard to, again, there's no bumper sticker statement saying my title, my absolute definite purpose in life is X, because we're not just one thing. If we are kind of made in the image and likeness of something greater than ourselves, then that encompasses a lot. But what is the best of all of those things? What is the highest of all of those things? What are the things that are actually going to bring the most help and healing to yourself, your family, and the world? So so it's hard for me to answer that question. You can see I'm kind of talking around it a little bit. I will say this.
I'm glad the author of the book's having a hard time answering the question.
Well, Napoleon Hill doesn't talk about like your definite life, one goal life. He talks about kind of more specific goals, which is what the workbook goes into. And the workbook, when we get into that task 4, a definite plan, that's really, that's very strategically placed by him and by us in the workbook, because a lot of people will talk about what they want to do, but most people won't actually get up and do it. And so one thing that I learned very quickly, and it became a mantra for me in life, and I just one day in like a meditative time, this phrase came into my head because I'd been thinking about this, and it was energy follows action. Energy follows action. We oftentimes will wait for the right conditions or the right circumstances to come around before we take action. We want the right energy before we take action. But it's actually the other way around. I was rereading this great book, The Science of Good.
Yes, I would love to talk with you about that.
I republished it recently in this edition. which is great. But this is, you can see my copy has.
Yeah, he's showing The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles for those who are just listening.
And my
to this.
copy
It's all
tattered
up, and
all of that.
Notes.
But one of my very favorite lines in this book, in this edition, is on page 79, and he says, "Do not wait for a change of environment before you act. Get a change of environment by action." And so task 4 in the workbook, a definite plan, is really that. It's changing your environment by taking an action. And there's a real balance that we need to find for ourselves, kind of a yin and yang balance. Yin being kind of the more, the passive side, and yang being the more active side. I'm a super yang. I think you're a super yang too, just based on all the talks that I've heard you give now. And super yangs need to have a definite plan of action so that they can kind of focus and hone down their actions, because people who are super yangs like myself, I can just do actions all day long. I can create plans all day long. I can plan my way through anything. So I need a balance of more yin time. And for me, yin time feels counterproductive because I'm not producing. And yet, when I bring myself into balance with that energy more and, kind of just balance, I end up doing more than when I'm just in action mode all the time. But on the other, so task 4, a definite plan, is great for super yang people to really hone down and just take those necessary actions. On the other hand, for people who are super yins, who are very passive in life, it's a great call to actually balance by taking more actions and being more active in their life. I think that one of my life goals is to be fully engaged in my life and not sit on the sidelines of anything. And so definite plans are really great ways to do that.
Well, I'm glad you kind of unpacked that a little bit, because one of the things that I read about, I forget which book Napoleon Hill revealed Andrew Carnegie's definite major purpose. But his definite major purpose was being the best steel producer in the world or something. It was something very specific to his industry and what he did. It had nothing to do with money, not philanthropy, none of that stuff. It was just being. And so that gave me a little bit of comfort of thinking, okay, well, my definite purpose in life doesn't have to be this ethereal, weird, mystical kind of, heal the world type thing. It's just what am I? So for now, the way I look at my definite purpose in life is very much akin to my definition of success, which you asked me about, which is to use my gifts of teaching and leadership in service of others and to enjoy this life that Father God has given me. That I feel like is my definite purpose in life. If I can do that, then I can be a coach, I could be a podcaster, I could be an author, I could run a car dealership. It doesn't matter. I can do any of those things. And that allows me to exercise my definite major purpose in life. But I also, and this is kind of where we'll start kind of winding the conversation down. Part of what you and August gave us in the workbook that obviously it came from the book, the Think and Grow Rich book, but the way you broke it down into these formulas was really, really good. And I want to talk a little bit about this. And that's these self-confidence formulas. And you've got, I think there's 5 of them. I think if I remember, auto-suggestion, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, there's five of them. And just so you know, what I have done is I've got this app on my phone called PrayerMate. It's just a prayer app. I've used it for years. It just helps me stay on track every morning. But part of what I've got it set up to do is I've listed all 5 of these self-confidence formulas in my app. So there's number 1, which is, I know that I have the ability to achieve the object of my definite purpose in life. Therefore, I demand of myself persistent, continuous action towards attainment. And then if I swipe, it goes to the next one. There's number 2, and there's number 3, there's number 4. So every single day, and I say every day, I mean, my intent to do it every day. Sometimes I might miss, but every single day of my life, I'm going through these, and I got them from your workbook. Now, they were in the book, Think and Grow Rich, because he mentions them. But because you took those and put them into formulas, man, that it has very much helped me to really think through these auto suggestions, and we don't have time to get into today. Maybe we could do something else about that where we go deeper into the mechanics of how this works. But this idea of auto suggestion, this self hypnosis, this this mantra, these things that you say to yourself, they're not magical, they're not mystical. There's just a way God created us. Like if we put something in enough times, it becomes reality. So I wonder how that has affected you. Was it a big impact before you wrote the workbook, or did it become more real as you wrote the workbook and started?
I think it was a big impact before the workbook. And, you know, one of the threads between all of these kinds of books, let me look here, Think and Grow Rich, The Science of Mind, The Magic of Believing, The Richest Man in Babylon, The Master Key System, As a Man Thinketh, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, The Golden Key, The Game of Life, It Works, How to Attract Money by Joseph Murphy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things, I bet, I know you have, and we could have a fun time talking about all of it, but one of the keys that runs through all of these books is this idea of overcoming all of the negativity that's around us. Ernest Holmes calls it the race consciousness, and by race he means human race consciousness, the kind of the lowest common denominator thought, and overcoming that, constantly overcoming that throughout your day. I think it's in Think and Grow Rich where Napoleon Hill says we are bombarded 7 times with more negativity than positivity. So you have to spend 7 times more of your thinking overcoming that just to break even with the negativity that you're going to get in life. And so these self-confidence formulas, Game of Life is brilliant for having just a whole section of what she calls denials and affirmations. And again, stating an affirmation or a self-confidence formula is not going to be a magical incantation. What it is it's going to just be a constant positive reminder to neutralize and then overcome all the negativity that we get all of the time.
Florence Shen, for those that have mentioned that book, he mentioned The Game of Life and How to Play It. Florence Shen, her books, all of her books, for those of you watching this on YouTube, you're getting the good stuff today. This is all her books in one book. So they're not, all her books are really short. And that book is phenomenal. The Secret Doors of Success was another one that she wrote. And there was one that I just found. I don't know if you knew about this. You probably do know about this, but I was on YouTube just going through the YouTube rabbit hole. And there was a book, an unpublished book by Florence Shen that they've released an audio version, and I read. I don't remember the name of it.
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about. Yeah, good. Yeah, it was good. Yeah, she was great.
Anyway, she
was known as Flossie, and she
was
lived
great.
in New York City.
Did she and Napoleon Hill ever know each other that we know of? Because they were contemporaries in terms of when they lived and wrote and more.
No, not to my knowledge. She was a bohemian who lived in New York City, and she was married to an artist, a kind of a semi-influential artist at the time, and they got divorced. And she was a free spirit. Her friends called her Flossie, and this edition, which is one that I published, it has an introduction by me, and it has some information. There's not a ton of information we know about her. But what I love about her is a couple things. One is that she was just her own person, complete bohemian, complete artistic. She was multi-talented. She was an illustrator. But I also loved how, like you said, the books are so short. This book is just at 100 pages. And she says in 100 pages what it takes other people volumes to say. And she just narrows it right down, right to the point. In fact, I think most of these authors do that pretty darn well. Get right to the point of the matter in a way that a lot of authors don't do today, because I publish authors of today as well. And what I love about these authors, these kind of pillar authors, is that they really had a command, and they believed this material so much that they would make these statements. There was no kind of softening it, like, well, if you do this, then you might have that. They were like, do this, you will get that. And I love that really strong sense of belief and faith in the material. And it yields results.
Well, you and I could probably talk for hours on this topic, and I would relish it. I would absolutely love it. But to respect your time, I think we'll kind of draw this thing to a close. So as we close out, I'm going to ask you this question: what is your favorite book by Napoleon Hill? Is it Think and Grow Rich, or is there another one?
I would say my favorite book by Napoleon Hill is Think and Grow Rich, in part because it's the first one that I read, and it really unlocked a lot for me. I've published many books by Napoleon Hill. I've loved every single one of them. But for me, I think it's Think and Grow Rich. I do love Outwitting the Devil as well. I agree. That's a wonderful book.
I think Outwitting the Devil for me is my favorite. But it is based on the things that he wrote in Think and Grow Rich. It's just a different storytelling, and listening to the audiobook.
What are some of your others? I lifted a bunch of them, and you said I've read all of those. What are some of your others? If you had to list 2 or 3 more titles in addition to Napoleon Hill, what would they be?
So Florence Shen's probably my favorite other author. So Florence Shen, Napoleon Hill. I really like Genevieve Behrend. What's the name of the book that she wrote? Your Invisible Power, where she talks about going to see Thomas Troward. That's just a phenomenal story. I thought that was great. And I loved Thomas Troward's response to her. I know you and I, this is Inside Baseball, you know what he said, but everybody else needs to go read that, because as a follower of Jesus, I appreciate that, because I think that, in my opinion, it's a lot of what's missing from this new thought movement as we talk about this invisible power, this Napoleon Hill calls it the infinite intelligence, and they do it on purpose. But I think, like for me, I follow Jesus. I'm going to talk. It's Yahweh. It's Jesus. That's who this is. So I think Genevieve Behrend, Florence Shen, Napoleon Hill, and then more recent. Well, and Wallace Wattles. Love Wallace Wattles. The Science of Getting Rich. One of my favorite books is The Science of Getting Rich. And then more recent is Psycho-Cybernetics, Maxwell Maltz, written I think in the 50s, and that's really
I've got 2 new Psycho-Cybernetics books coming out that are being done in conjunction with the Psycho-Cybernetics Foundation. So stay tuned.
Interesting. Well, I've done the same thing I did with you. I've reached out to Matt Fury, who was part of that project and Psycho-Cybernetics Foundation, and he agreed to come on the show, but he hasn't booked his time yet. So Matt, if you're listening, it's time to get on the show. We need to have a conversation.
We're publishing with you, Matt. If you haven't read this book, by the way, just let me slip in one more. This is worth reading. The Power of Decision by Raymond Charles Barker. He's contemporary with all of these guys, and this is just a life-changing book as well.
I've listened to that book. I've not read it physical, but I've listened to that. As a matter of fact, I've got a guy coming to do a workshop with me. And of course, this show won't be released until it's after Tapping, but he's coming to do a workshop with me. And one of the sessions he's going to be doing is on the power of decision, because making decisions sometimes just gives you the power to do whatever it is you're trying to do. It's indecision. Procrastination
Right.
is the power of the devil, of Satan, of our enemy, to keep us from taking action. And I love what you said. Energy follows action. And if we don't have the energy to do it, well, just go do something, and energy is going to come along with it. You're going to find it. So, Joel, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm going to give you the last word before we sign off for today. Anything you want to leave with the audience? Any kind of nuggets of wisdom? Anything you want to say before we sign off?
I would just say, if you're interested, if you've not read Think and Grow Rich or any of these great classics, start on page 1 and begin to not just read the book, but constantly think to yourself, how does this apply to my life? How can I translate what the author's saying into my situation and then take action? And if you just do that every day, even once every day, things begin to change. And I really get excited seeing the change as it begins to happen in people's lives.
Well, thank you, Joel. I appreciate you being here. And thank you, Mr. or Mrs. Listener, for being here, tuning into the show today. This, whether or not you, listener, enjoyed this was the joy of my week so far, having this conversation with Joel, because I could go into these conversations about this metaphysical reality of what we live in and all these great classic authors like we've just talked about on the show. But I hope that maybe if this is the first time you've been introduced to any of these concepts, go look at it. One of the best books to start with is the one that we started talking about today, is Think and Grow Rich. And Joel and August have written the Think and Grow Rich workbook, which is a really good companion, but it doesn't replace reading the book. And I don't think he would mind me saying that. Go read the whole thing first, then go do the workbook and start applying it. Now, that book is going to take you some time to get through if you really, really want to get it. One of the things that he and I talked about in this is that sometimes you have to read a book over and over and over again for it to actually sink in, rather than just reading it once and saying, yeah, I read that book a long time ago. But go check out Think and Grow Rich. Go check out Joel's stuff. You can go reach him at joelfotinos.com. That's JoelFotinos, joelfotinos.com. It's been an honor to have him on the show. He's written lots of books, all of which are in this New Thought movement, this metaphysical concepts. Go check him out. This is going to make you a better person, a better father, better husband, better mother, better wife. It's going to make you a better business owner. It's going to make you a better neighborhood, community person. These books are going to make the world a better place. So again, big thanks to Joel, and thank you for listening. If you haven't yet subscribed or reviewed this podcast, please do that. That gets us in front of more people, so more people are exposed to this type of content. And we're just trying to bring good to the world. But thank you for listening. As always, I am the real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.